So again, as part of this whole propaganda effort about Afghanistan, what is the mainstream media doing again? They're doing exactly what they were doing in 2001. So if you pick up a newspaper now, you can't tell the difference between 2001 and 2021. You see headlines like this. This is from the New Yorker. Afghanistan, again, becomes a cradle for jihadism and Al-Qaeda. Here's from The Guardian. The Taliban's return to power in Afghanistan will be a boon for international jihadism. Here's from Fox News. With Taliban victory, Afghanistan could become the second school of jihadism. And if you just look this up, it's full of articles like that. Once again, they're trying to justify the war, say like, look, we had to be there because there's a risk of Al-Qaeda, growing and maintaining a foothold. And now because we're leaving, look, it's going to become an Al-Qaeda terror hub again. And you see, the problem with what they're saying here is that, number one, if Al-Qaeda exists as a threat to the world, it is your fault because the US, the CIA, and other Western elements financed the Mujahideen. Bin Laden, Zawahiri, all these figures received millions from the Americans. They received financial support, logistical support, and you name it. So if Al-Qaeda is a threat, the CIA and the US created Al-Qaeda. Saudi Arabia, a close US ally, a close UK ally, is by anyone's standards, by any metric, one of the biggest sponsors of terrorism, of global terrorism. Okay? Everyone knows this. Every person in Washington knows this. Every person in Whitehall knows this. This is an open secret. They all know this. Who's been exporting Wahhabism for decades? It's the Saudis. And why are they able to do this? Because they have a special relationship with the United States. The United States, as you know, the dollar is no longer pegged to gold. Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. And now you have the petrodollar, right, for a few decades. So the dollar, it forms the basis for all oil transactions and sales in the world, right? So because Saudi Arabia and other countries, they only sell oil with US dollars in exchange for US dollars, this helps the dollar maintain its standing in the world as a stable currency. And it, of course, provides America with enormous gains, right? This is a real form of power for the United States and why it is able to do all the things it does. Half of all transactions in the world are conducted in US dollars, right? And one of the things that bolsters the US dollar is the fact that not only Saudi Arabia met and helped supply the energy needs of the United States in the West for such a long time, but that it also helps the currency of the United States maintain such a standing and prestige, right, in the world. And so in exchange for that, in exchange for this, the United States looks the other way. They look the other way when Saudi Arabia is exporting Wahhabism, right? This form of fundamentalist Islam, and of course they did this in Pakistan and so on. And so, if we look at also what happened in Syria, in the last decade and what is happening right now, you go to Idlib in the north of Syria, you have tens of thousands of jihadist fighters. Many of them have not only received support from the West and from Turkey, but also from Saudi Arabia, right? And some of these groups have disappeared. Some of them have merged, right? So if we look at, for example, Al-Qaeda when it was in Syria, right? It's called Jabhat al-Nusra. And then they renamed it from Jabhat al-Nusra to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. And so Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is running Idlib. Now, you have other groups, of course, but Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is the big dog, and it's being run by al-Jolani. These groups, Al-Qaeda, they exist thanks to Saudi support. They exist because of Saudi support, among other things, of course. And it's not just about Al-Qaeda, but we're talking about Saudi Arabia's export sponsoring of terrorism. Just look at 9/11, right? Who are the hijackers? 15 out of 19 are Saudis. Did the United States and Britain invade Saudi Arabia? Did they mention Saudi Arabia? Did the name of this country even come up in reference to 9/11? No, they blamed it on Afghanistan, right? They blamed Afghanistan for housing terrorists that it financed and helped create. And they blamed Iraq. Donald Rumsfeld, like a sack of shit, stood there and said, there are known knowns and there are known unknowns. And he tried to create a link between Al-Qaeda and Iraq. There is no link between Al-Qaeda and Iraq. Saddam Hussein is running a Ba'athist secular regime. He has nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. They're mortal enemies. He's not housing or offering amnesty to Al-Qaeda. This is lunacy. Anyone with a shred of knowledge about the Middle East would know this is bullshit. And they still sold it because most people do not have a shred of knowledge about the Middle East. And so they get away with this. And the reporters are dishonest and ignorant themselves. So the New York Times and all these other papers, they just repeat what the intelligence agencies and the government tells them. So Tony Blair, George Bush, Donald Rumsfeld, Jack Straw, all of these filth, these scourge of humanity, these neocon bastards, they come and say, well, you know, Al-Qaeda is in Iraq and Saddam Hussein is helping Al-Qaeda. It's a safe haven for terrorists. We have to attack Al-Qaeda and we have to attack them in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we have to go to war. What about Saudi Arabia, where there's a real link? Not a word. Obviously, I'm not saying they should attack Saudi Arabia. I'm saying that they're hypocrites because their friends, the Saudis, are helping to export global terrorism, are helping to establish these networks and finance these groups. The petrodollar, this is very ironic because a lot of the sales money that they make from from selling oil goes to finance this terrorism abroad, whether it's in Central Asia or it's in the Middle East. So they never say anything about Saudi Arabia. And it's not just that. It's women's rights too, right? So you've been hearing in the media a lot of things about, even Tony Blair saying, well, look, you know, there are 50,000 women who can go to university. Yeah, that's great. What about women in Saudi Arabia? You want to come here and talk to me about human rights and women's rights? Why do you only talk about Afghanistan? Why do you only talk about countries that you're targeting and you don't say anything about Saudi Arabia? Women, I'm not even sure if women can drive in Saudi Arabia. I think they might have changed that 2 years ago. You know, just why is there no mention of this? Why do they only talk about Afghanistan in terms of women's rights? Why not Saudi Arabia? Is it because Saudi Arabia is keeping your dollar safe, your currency? Is it because Saudi Arabia is a regional policeman for you and a client state, a proxy state? Is it because of that? Because Saudi Arabia serves your interests? Yes, of course it's because of that. So this leads us to one conclusion, that this has nothing to do with women's rights or human rights. What they're saying is bullshit. This has to do with who is a U.S. enemy, who is not serving our interests, who is not bending the knee to the United States. Oh, you're not bending the knee? Oh, you don't have any women's rights. Oh, you're not a democracy. We're coming for you. Saudi Arabia is a democracy? Saudi Arabia respects women's rights? Saudi Arabia is not exporting terrorism? You hit all three, man. Not a word. Not a goddamn word. Never. Saudi Arabia even killed one of the Washington Post's most prolific journalists, Jamal Khashoggi. They dismembered him. I mean, not just killed him. This is a brutal, brutal death. Nothing from the U.S. Khashoggi is not just working for the Washington Post. He's living in the United States. He's a U.S. resident. And he most certainly would have gotten citizenship after a couple of years, I'm sure. Nothing. The maximum that you had is a report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which is now headed by Avril Haines, saying that Mohammed bin Salman's personal detail, his bodyguards, were involved in the assassination, and they think to a degree of absolute certainty that he was involved and he was behind the assassination. Okay, and what are you doing about it? Nothing. Right? So the United States just sanctioned Cuba, for example, which hilariously for, unjust imprisonment of protesters, when the United States has a torture base on Cuban soil, right? So they sanction other countries over lies, and they sanction them over much smaller affronts. And when Saudi Arabia kills a US-based journalist, they do nothing. Nothing. They've sanctioned and attacked other countries over less. So this gives you an idea, a glimpse to which degree, to which amount the United States has not only a relationship of a special nature with Saudi Arabia, but also protects Saudi Arabia, and vice versa in other manners. And so when they're talking about Afghanistan being a terror hub, this is a pile of manure. Because if they were really concerned about terrorism, they would be concerned about Saudi Arabia. If they were really concerned about Al-Qaeda, they would not be supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria. They would not have given money and weapons and training, not just the Americans, the British did this as well, to all these jihadist groups inside Syria. They would not be protecting Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and other elements. So for example, James Jeffrey, who's the special envoy, the US ambassador, when he was talking to PBS, and we watched this documentary together, we looked through it. I did a 45-minute segment on it. You should definitely go watch it. They're trying to rehabilitate the leader of HTS. Jolani. Jolani is an Al-Qaeda commander. And again, we're not saying that, with hyperbole. No, he was a commander in Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And now he's running Al-Qaeda in Syria. He has a $10 million bounty on his head. Why is the U.S. protecting him? Right? Al-Zawahiri, who bombed the Egyptian embassy next to my school, has a $25 million bounty on his head. Why is that when the U.S. was giving him money before? This is all a show. This is all a show. They claim they're fighting terrorism, but then they turn a blind eye to Saudi Arabia. They claim they're fighting terrorism, and then they turn a blind eye to Idlib. They claim they care about women's rights, and then they don't care about women's rights in Saudi Arabia. Man, when are people going to wake the fuck up? When are you going to get this through your fucking head? These people care about money, they care about empire, and they care about their interests. They don't give a fuck about women's rights. They don't give a fuck about human rights. They don't give a fuck about you. Why are you kissing their asses? Why do you insist on kissing the ass of U.S. foreign policy? Do you not have any self-fucking respect? This is unbelievable. We're in 2021. They learn nothing. They talk about human rights. Why is the U.S. giving weapons to Israel to kill Palestinians? That's promoting human rights? Get out of here, man. You know, when you see headlines like this garbage, this was garbage in 2001 and it's garbage now. Right? On the one hand, they want to tell you that it was good to go to Afghanistan, that they accomplished so much. And then at the same time, oh no, we didn't accomplish enough. Al-Qaeda is going to come back in 2 minutes. Oh, they're such hypocrites, man. This is really the pinnacle of hypocrisy. And we're in 2021. It's been 20 years now since the war on terror started. It's been 40 years since the war in Afghanistan when the U.S. was supporting the Mujahideen. And you had the goddamn Mujahideen in Reagan's office. In his office, this slimy creature. And they're in his office, in the Oval Office, doing a photo op with him, right? And then some of them, of course, go on to form Al-Qaeda. Some of them go on to form other groups. And they want to sit here and act like they're fighting terrorism. No, no, no. You support terrorism directly, and your allies support terrorism, and you turn a blind eye. So this leads me to believe you do not care about fighting terrorism. On the contrary, you are enabling it. This is very important to understand, because these groups are destabilizing everyone. And, you know, when we look at, for example, Syria, they tried to sell you this lie about moderate rebels. There's no moderate rebels. They're like the whole concept of this phrase, moderate rebels. Moderate in regards to what? Moderate compared to what? Obviously, there's a problem here. Yes? You have hardcore extremist elements, and they exist. Yes? And who's funding them? The West and the West's allies. And they try to rebrand a lot of these jihadist groups, a lot of these takfiri, Salafi jihadist groups as moderate rebels. You know, like I say, 50 flavors of jihad. They come up with different names, and then some of them merge and some of them kill each other. It's like gang warfare, truly. And then they all receive somehow magically support from Saudi Arabia or the United States or Qatar or Turkey, whatever. Who's gaining from this? Israel is gaining from this. Israel has worked directly with Al-Qaeda. You know, this is not me saying that. The ex-chief of the Mossad, Israel's intelligence service, is in an interview on Al Jazeera with Mehdi Hassan. And we looked at this interview here on the channel. And he's saying it in the studio, like in broad daylight. Yeah, Israel helped Al-Qaeda in Syria. Why? Because we have the same goal, which is toppling the Syrian government. They don't care. Like, Al-Qaeda attacked the U.S. on 9/11, right? Israel is a U.S. ally. Why is Israel helping the enemy of the United States? I didn't say this. He said that. He's the ex-chief of the Mossad. So he's coming along and just admitting that these people work together. And we know the history in the Cold War. So just think, use your brain, man. Who's financing and helping terrorists here? Iraq? Syria? Afghanistan? No. It's the U.S., it's Israel, Saudi Arabia. They don't even hide it. They don't even hide it. James Jeffrey is saying that HTS, which is Al-Qaeda in Syria, is the least worst option, and that they are an asset for the United States. What? They're so shameless. They're so shameless, right? So whether, you know, these people are blowing up an embassy in Islamabad, so where I was in Islamabad, or whether they're firing mortars in Damascus on my cousin's university campus, or they're doing things in Libya or Pakistan. These people have powerful actors supporting them. And if you just look at the public statements, never mind the things that they've released, you can see very clearly who's giving them money and who is supporting them and giving them political and political amnesty and logistical support and military support. And it's most certainly not Afghanistan, it's not Syria, it's not Iraq, it's not Iran, it's the US and their allies. And they are shameless about it. And so this is very, very concerning, because if you really care about fighting terrorism, and anyone should be, and truly, not just in name, like as George Bush and Tony Blair pretend they are, or Western countries pretend they are, then you cannot ignore this. And the problem is that people who work at the New York Times, who work at the Washington Post, they ignore this. Yeah, every once in a while you might have an article that actually has some truth in it, but for the most part they ignore this. So instead of looking at what happened in Afghanistan, saying, well, if Al-Qaeda gained strength, we funded Al-Qaeda, meaning we, the United States, right? If it's an American reporter writing that, and if it's British, they would say the same thing. They also had a role in that. And so they're ignoring Saudi Arabia, they're ignoring Syria, they're ignoring all of these other disasters that they've created, and pretending that if they don't go into Afghanistan for another 50,000 years, then, this... I'm so tired of this. I'm really tired of this, man. You have to remember the media, the mainstream media, the New York Times, BBC, ITV, you name it, Sky, they are serving one purpose, which is to help corporations. And war is a racket, right? As we all know, the famous, there's lots of money involved in this. And so they protect their interests by using the media, by buying the media. And we cannot let them get away with that.